Welcome, Joe Devon. Thank you, Joe, for doing this from overseas. Joe is going to talk today about dark patterns through the lens of accessibility. I heard a lot about this talk, and I can't wait to learn more about it. Joe, please feel free to start, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you, Farah. Let's see.
That was Maha.
Oh, thank you, Maha. First, I wanted to ask you all, what are your mother tongues? I want to play a little bit with the chat. Can you type in the chat what language, what your primary mother tongue is? Greek. Okay, can you hear me now? I think the host muted all of us. Okay, English, Greek. All right, good. Any French? Not so far. English, great. Okay, so today I'm going to be speaking about dark patterns through the lens of accessibility. My name is Joe Devon, and American Idol changed my life. Have all of you heard of American Idol? Since this is a US TV show, there are lots of other shows that are similar in different countries. So feel free to put into the chat if you've heard of it. But essentially, it was the #1 TV show in America, and it was a singing show. And it changed my life not because I'm a singer, but because I was hired to rebuild the website. Thank you, Christina. Looks like somebody needs to get muted. Okay. So I was hired to re-architect the website and back in 2018, and we also worked on the voting app, and it's a big deal because more people voted for American Idol than for the President of the United States. And the reason it changed my life is that the team that I built out, AmericanIdol.com and the mobile apps, is the same one that I built a digital agency, and we got lots of the same type of work together. Did a lot of work for Fox and other entertainment shows, and added Disney and NFL, which is football, which is very big here in the United States. So that's a little bit about me, but I also, around the same time, co-founded Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is a day that I just wrote a blog post and it went viral every year. And the purpose of the day is to make people aware of the importance of making digital products accessible to people with disabilities. And we've had every year, like the CEOs of the big tech companies from Apple, Microsoft, Google, we get a lot of buy-in from Amazon and different companies, and we have a Twitter reach of 200 million users. So I started with a blog post to get into the accessibility realm and wound up completely immersed in it just by virtue of the fact that we have such a large social media audience. So I found this thing called dark patterns and realized that nobody had really spoken about dark patterns when it came to accessibility. So before I dive into it, I want to give you a little background about what dark patterns, where they come from, the concept of it. So it began with design patterns, and please add in the chat if you've heard of design patterns or not. Essentially, it kind of came out of the architecture world where there were different kinds of patterns, and these software developers, it's called the Gang of Four, created a general repeatable solution to a common problem in software design. Maria is familiar with it. Thank you, Maria. And this is really meant to be an interactive session. So I think we have a small number of people, 20 people now, that's good. The more that you interact, the more fun that this is going to be. So the design patterns is basically, instead of trying to figure out the same problems over and over again, you create a pattern for software developers to follow so that you use a best practice in creating a solution to a problem. So it's a description or template for how to solve a problem, usable in many situations. So design patterns became really big and changed the industry, and then someone came up with an idea of anti-patterns, because you get to see over and over again that certain people were using poor software design to solve a problem, and it caused more problems. And so the definition of an anti-pattern is an oft-used but poorly architected solution to a common problem in software design. Now, dark patterns is similar to an anti-pattern, except that an anti-pattern is usually not on purpose. It is something that people mistakenly do because they did a bad job of software design. But a dark pattern is a user interface, and this is the official definition, that has been carefully crafted to trick users into doing things, typically to make money. And it was invented by Harry Brignall at darkpatterns.org. So if you go to darkpatterns.org, you'll really see a bit of the history. By the way, just in case anybody needs it, I try to read out the pictures and the slides, the bullets as much as possible, which is something that typically is not fun, but it is a more accessible way to provide presentations. So please excuse me if I'm reading out the slides sometimes. So Brignall came out with 12 dark patterns, and they were bait and switch, confirm shaming, disguised ads, forced continuity, friend spam, hidden costs, misdirection, price comparison prevention, roach motel, sneak into basket, trick questions, and privacy zuckering. And I will show you examples of these as we go along. Now, the good thing about this way that Harry Brignall created the dark patterns and categorized them is that it covers most of the major instances. However, I noticed pretty quickly that there's some serious negatives to this, which is that it was a little too specific, and many examples fit multiple categories, which is one of the difficult aspects of categorizing dark patterns, because that it sometimes goes into different categories. But I felt like we needed a better way. So I kept researching and found that Purdue University came up with 5 strategies of dark patterns. They got an NSF, and National Science Foundation grant to research this, and they came up with nagging, obstruction, sneaking, interface interference, and forced action. And by the way, this is just a little bit of background. It's going to be a lot more fun shortly. So I hope you're not too bored getting this background. So nagging is redirection of expected functionality that persists beyond one or more interactions. Obstruction is making a process more difficult than it needs to be with the intent of dissuading certain actions. Sneaking is attempting to hide, disguise, or delay the divulging of information that is relevant to the user. Interface interference is manipulation of the user interface that privileges certain actions over others. And forced action is requiring the user to perform a certain action to access or continue to access certain functionality. And now there's one more. After I started doing this talk, Princeton came out with their own study, and they gave 7 categories: sneaking, urgency, misdirection, social proof, scarcity, obstruction, and forced action, which have very similar definitions. I'm not going to read them because it's not that relevant. They were more into shopping and e-commerce, which we're less going to be looking at. They surveyed 11,000 shopping sites. 11% of the sites had dark patterns. And the bad thing is they discovered third-party services that offer dark pattern features. And 2 of them openly advertised services to enable deceptive practices. So it's one thing when some team comes out and says, oh, maybe we can make a little more money if we try and do a dark pattern. But if you advertise a service, that's just like advertising, robbery almost. I mean, maybe not quite, but pretty bad. And the bad thing also is that the more popular a site is, according to the Alexa top sites, the more likely it is to have a dark pattern. And that's probably because they have the money to analyze how can we make more money by trying different user interface elements, they find out how to do it and they create a dark pattern. And then it winds up affecting a lot more people, which is really sad. So after looking at the dark patterns, I started to come up and take a look at, well, if dark patterns are bad for the average person, how do they affect people with disabilities? And they do affect them more than average. So just as a background, the type of disabilities there are visual, auditory. By the way, in the audience, how many people know what, I don't have a good sense of what the technical background is of the audience. So if you can put in the chat, if you've heard of assistive technology and if you're familiar with the general categories of disabilities. But essentially there's visual, so you could be blind or just have a visual impairment or color blindness. You might use a screen reader, which is an assistive technology. It looks like most people are familiar with it. That's good. Auditory would mean hearing loss or deafness. It might use closed captions. Then we've got motor, which would be paralysis, where you might use a sip and puff device. Loss of limbs, lack of fine motor control, tremors. People with Parkinson's might have a motor disability. Cognitive would include ADD, dyslexia, visual, reading comprehension, dementia, and then you've got seizures and vestibular disorders where flashing images or moving images could cause you problems. So all of these are the different types of impacts. Now I'm going to share with you a few links where you can find this online: darkpatterns.org, the Dark Patterns hashtag on Twitter, darkpatterns.uxp2.com, and then here is the Princeton, so webtransparency.cs.princeton.edu dark-patterns, spottheunsubscribe.tumblr.com, and reddit.com/r/ I hope this is okay to say asshole design, otherwise I'm in trouble. And I will share the slides, Jeremy, or Farrar with the team if you would like to see this later, since it's a lot to type. And then Reddit created a cool flowchart which explains how they categorize it. If you don't like a design, now is it a bad design? If it's not, then they put it under mildly infuriating. If it is a bad design and it's not on purpose, they put it under crappy design. And then if it is on purpose, they put it under, excuse me again, asshole design. So now we're going to get into the fun part. And as you're looking at these dark patterns, what I'd love for you to do is think about any dark patterns that relate to this type of category that you can share with us in the end. For the most part, I would like us to interact in the chat. However, at the end of each section, I'll give you an opportunity to share on video a dark pattern that you have seen. And it's a little harder to do on Zoom, but we always learn a lot when we talk to the audience. So a nagging pattern is officially a redirection of expected functionality that persists beyond one or more interactions, but you got to take a look at it in order to understand it. So here we have one from Google where it repeatedly asks the user for permission to use location data. And you can see it says, don't show again. However, this is grayed out. And they keep pestering the user to say, use enhanced location services. And I'll read out the slide. Let Google's location service to help apps determine location. This means sending anonymous location data to Google even when no apps are running. Don't show again, disagree, agree. You have to click on agree, otherwise the don't show again is disabled. And once you click agree, then it won't show it to you again. So you won't be able to remove yourself from this. So it's really a tricky way that just keeps nagging you over and over again because they want your location services and to give up your privacy. So and please share this in the chat. How does this affect people with different disabilities? So if you have a visual disability, how will this affect you? I would contend that it would affect you a little bit more if you're using a screen reader. Popping this up can be very distracting when you're in the middle of using the app. Not to mention that it's more prone to winding up having like, what are they called again? Not the tab traps, but basically you're trapped in a place where you tab over and over again and you can't get out of a box. So keyboard trap, thank you. This is a lot more prone to that kind of situation. And it's also confusing. How about auditory? I don't think it necessarily affects people with an auditory. What about a motor disability? Definitely. If you're using a sip and puff and you have to deal with this constantly, you're much more likely to turn off a nag screen because it will destroy your ability to use the app. And how about cognitive? Sarah adds, definitely people with attention issues. And then Christina says, cognitive, a person can forget where he was. Absolutely. So this is the pattern that I'm going to ask all of you to share. Which disability do you think might be more affected? And typically we're going to see a lot of the same situation where it would be visual, motor, cognitive. How about seizure vestibular? That's typically affected less often. All right, let's jump to the next one. Here we have Instagram. And by the way, if anybody has some kind of disability and I forgot to read out a slide or something like that, if you can just drop a line in the chat, I'll make sure to describe it a little bit better. So here we have Instagram. They pop up a little notification that says, please turn on notifications. Know right away when people follow you or like and comment on your photos. Not now, okay. So why does it say not now? Like that means that they're going to keep on popping it up over and over and over again. And there's no option to say no. So you only have to say okay. And so you will constantly be nagged with the same thing. So to the audience, which disability might be more affected? Well, I would say, since nobody's replying, visual, motor, and cognitive, I would think. Now, here's another one. This is Uber. When a driver tries to stop for a day, they are offered an extra, they're told, hey, you only made $34. Why didn't you make it to $40? You're $6 away from making $40 in net earnings. Are you sure you want to go offline? And then they have a go offline and keep driving section. Maria asked why visual on the last one. The reason visual is, again, it's the same reason in that when you have a pop-up that affects your flow as a screen reader, it's just super annoying to have to go in and constantly go in and push a button. But also, I think it's a lot more prone to getting into those focus traps and just general mistakes. That's the feedback that I've gotten. But if a screen reader user has a comment on that, I would love to hear it. Because I learned so much more from the audience than from my assumptions. Okay, is everyone clear about what the problem here is with this dark pattern for Uber? Essentially, imagine that you're a driver and you spent the entire day driving and you're so exhausted, and then you just get this nag. Okay, you're a loser. Why don't you spend a little more time and then you can make it to $40, which is a totally arbitrary number. Okay. Christina says, yeah, so that's good. All right, which type of disability would be most affected? And this is really much more helpful if we get audience participation. So if you could, motor, need to address this pop-up. Yes, absolutely, from Christina. And again, I tend to think that screen readers, it's a little bit more annoying. Do we have any screen reader users in the audience? I'd love to hear from you in the chat, or if it's easier for you to unmute yourself, happy to hear from you as well, because I really love to hear the impact that you feel when there are pop-ups. Michael says visual contrast. There's a bit over there. And then Christina says cognitive due to distraction. Sarah says this sort of guilting is terrible for people with depression, for example. Absolutely. Any others?
Well, hello, and I'm using a screen reader and both NVDA and JAWS, also for testing accessibility.
Yeah.
And one of the major problem is that when pop-ups are not really pop-up and the screen reader does not move to the dialogue.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Yeah, that was very helpful. I think that's a great answer. And now we have from the audience another chat. Hang on, I have to get my cursor here. Seizure should be affected by color, contrast, or animation that may be used. Okay. I'm not sure what you mean, Christina. Would you like to explain? Feel free to go off mute if you want.
Sorry, my internet is very bad. I don't know if you can hear me. I have some issues today. So sometimes because of the color contrast or the animation that they may be using, this could trigger some of the seizures. For example, me, myself, have migraine issues and I have this aura. I get a visual effect before my migraine starts. So sometimes heavy animation or if you don't have color contrast in your application, this may trigger this kind of issues with me. So that's why I commented.
I got it. Thank you very much. It's good to hear because there are, I don't necessarily know as many people that have had seizures, so it's good to understand this. Because then you get a more direct sense of it. All right, let's go to the next one. I have a lot of examples, so I should probably go a little bit faster. Here's another one where if you try and delete the Uber app, Uber warns you that it will delete all data on the phone, but it will keep it in the cloud. And it's a little bit vague, but the concern is that if the user values their privacy and they don't read the text or they read it very quickly, they may not notice that their data will be kept in the cloud. So I think this one is clearly a big issue, a big cognitive issue, as well as the usual suspects. Feel free to add more in the chat. The next one, and I'm going to go a little bit quicker through a few of these. This comes from Apple. They have a pop-up that says your disk is almost full, save space by optimizing storage, and then a close or a manage button. And they keep popping this up over and over again, even if you have plenty of storage. And if it could be 10%, but it's still enough and you're never going to run out, why can't you just click no? They just say close or manage. And then you have try the new Safari, which has a later button and a try now button, but not a no button. It is extremely annoying. So if anybody has unique idea here of which disability it would affect, please share in the chat. Here is one from Spotify. This one says social, private session. Choose a private session if you don't want to share what you're listening to. Each session lasts until you've been inactive for 6 hours. So if you need to, every 6 hours, you need to set this over and over again. If you have a motor disability, this is extremely annoying. And I once showed this slide and a screen reader user was saying, I think it was for Spotify, but it might have been another music service. They bought a premium version, which was supposed to get rid of the ads. And all that happened was they turned off the ad with CSS, but the actual content was still there. So the screen reader would read it out. And that's another case where a screen reader user might be more effective. And then Sarah says, these are bad for non-technical users. That is definitely the case. We need a comment from M. I think we need to create a job like accounts manager. M, can you share with us what you mean by that?
All right. In this evolving world, we are creating more jobs like accounts manager, and especially with the high levels of technology, and with all these notifications and stuff. So sometimes it's best to have someone by your side, for example.
I think your connection started to go out. Yeah, it looks like you're...
manage all these...
We lost you, but now you're back.
Like I said, with this ever-evolving world with high levels of technology, we need to have someone by our side, like a personal assistant, but a business, like, you know, create a job like accounts manager.
Yeah, and that's...
to manage all these pop-ups and notifications.
Yeah, you're right. And if you're using assistive technology, you actually want to be independent. You don't want to have to rely on someone else to manage your pop-ups. So yes, I think everybody can use an account manager or an executive assistant, but if you have a disability, you don't want to need somebody else to help you with a user interface dark pattern. That was a great point. Okay, here is one. Oh, this one really makes me mad. Esquire, get timeless inspiration with 80 books every person should read. Enter your email to unlock the list. And then there's a big button after you enter your email where you hit unlock the 80 must reads. And then instead of a button, they have a link that says, this is the only way to say no, is you have to say, I don't read. Can anybody share what they think of this? Do you understand what I'm saying? That it says, I don't read. So you have to like humiliate yourself in order to say this. And can you imagine if you have a self-esteem, cognitive issues, self-esteem issues, shame? Michael says shame, absolutely. And there are plenty of examples of this one. Ina says seizure. Are you saying seizure because this particular look of this page is causing a problem, or are you somehow saying the cognitive issue, the I don't read can trigger something? Feel free to answer in the chat, and I'll come back to you. So, in conclusion, accessibility outcomes of nagging patterns impact people with disabilities more than other users. People with cognitive disabilities are more vulnerable to nagging. The user interface is more likely to be buggy with screen readers. And it is awful for people with mobility impairments who will more likely have to pay to stop the nagging. Now, I'm going to take a second and ask if anyone in the audience can think of a nagging pattern that they have run into, if they would like to share on the video or audio. Also, we have an announcement from Maha. Those of you who are using the computer now and would like to see the session's captions, please activate captions using the closed captions button. That's a good point. So has anybody got a dark pattern that they can think of that they would like to share? And if you don't think of one now, then we'll do it next time. All right, I'm going to keep going. Don't be shy. We're a friendly group here. Here we have a new one, obstruction. Oh, Maria says, software update with iOS. You cannot disable the red icon. Maria, would you like to share it on audio? If you don't want to, it's okay. But if you'd like to, feel free to say something.
Yes, it's like the nagging pattern where you keep on, you're reminded constantly to update your software, iOS software. And even on the app, the settings app, it's the only app on iOS where you cannot disable the red pop-up. I'm not sure the technical term, the red pop-up button. It's the only app that you cannot disable. And it also has this remind me later instead of cancel for the pop-up banners that show up. So that's also annoying. Yes.
Thank you.
I can piggyback that too, Joe. One of the things I find annoying with iOS is having to add the Apple Pay and set that up, and you get the little red icon for saying there's one, and I always think, oh, there's an update or something. It's like, no, they still want me to add my credit card in the settings. It's super annoying.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just to present myself, my name is Negoslav. If you allow me to give you an example, not from the web or mobile apps, but from the desktop app, it was from the last few weeks. It's about a Avira antivirus. It was screen reader accessible mostly in the past, but now it has updated itself and presents some buttons that are only presenting with letters like K, F, S, or just a button, and it nags in intervals by a few minutes, and you don't understand what it asks of you, maybe to register, to update, to upgrade, or whatever, but you don't know what it is asking for, and it annoys you in every few minutes, and it's terrible.
Yeah, that sounds really bad. Sorry you have to deal with that. That's a good one. We also have Michael here that says phone apps that put up ads after use, that's okay, part of the social contract, but they move the ad close button each time. Yes, that's a good one, Michael. That is interface interference, and we'll see some of those soon. All right. Obstruction. So the definition of obstruction is making a process more difficult than it needs to be with the intent of dissuading certain actions. By the way, anyone else have another one before I continue?
Can I add just one more?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, really quickly, when you get emails and you click unsubscribe and it tells you unsubscribe from these types of notifications, like you have to actually go in and dig in to find the list of different types of subscription listings that they have, which is really annoying and
yes,
difficult.
Yes, we'll have a bunch of examples of those too. Those are horrible. I just faced that myself. I didn't bring it, I meant to add it to this presentation, but I had that something similar with Verizon, where I was trying to delete one of my phone lines that I don't use anymore. And they make you call them and text them, and then they make you log in with the text. But if you want to add a line, you can do that, no problem.
I could add one more example.
Yes.
Example.
Yes.
By the way, with emails, sometimes I see newsletter mails that I want to unsubscribe. So you cannot go to the link to unsubscribe. You just can't, only with the mouse. So sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. If you can only do it with the mouse, then the screen reader is completely locked out, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
that in America, at least, that is grounds for a lawsuit. There was a legal term that I forgot that basically means like a particular group is targeted or treated unfairly, and that is illegal in the United States. All right, sorry, go ahead. I thought you're going to say something. Okay, so here's an example. Spotify premium, your subscription will automatically renew. Everybody's seen this type of thing before. And then you have a big button for update details. But if you want to cancel the subscription, it's kind of in green at the bottom to make the link. Would you like to cancel your subscription? And I won't show the pictures, but you have to select cancel 4 times to cancel. And that's why this is called obstruction, because it is obstructing you from canceling. So if anybody wants to comment how they feel, which disabilities this would affect most, please say something in the chat. But I would say, particularly motor impairment is certainly going to be impacted by this. Okay, here is one. And I don't try to bash on any particular company. I think every major company has issues. but Apple is getting a little bit today, a little bit of grief today. And this is an old one back from iOS 6. The option to disable ad tracking was hidden in an irrelevant location, and it uses trick wording, a double negative, to confuse the user. So I have a picture up here where you have to click General, About, Advertising, and then it says Limit Ad Tracking On. So to limit the ad tracking, you put it on versus off. It's pretty tricky language, and I think that would affect people with the cognitive issues a fair bit. I think Apple has improved a fair bit on this because they're really trying to be the privacy company. M says, military personnel or people who have a military way of thinking will get cognitive problems with Spotify. M, can you elaborate? No. Okay. Never mind then. All right, here is one. Oh my God. Can anybody see here? You've got 3 icons: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and it says don't want to receive email notifications. The color contrast is terrible because it is gray on white. But the real tricky part, and you'll see the screenshot below it, you have it in blue. It says don't want to receive email notifications, unsubscribe here. They took white text. They took the text that was already gray and they turned it white on white, so you literally couldn't see it. And what is actually, and somebody says visual for sure, absolutely. If you have contrast issues, you'll never figure this out unless you're using a screen reader. And this is one of those rare cases where a screen reader, an AT user, will have a better experience than everybody else, because a screen reader will read out unsubscribe here and the link, so you'll actually be able to unsubscribe better, which is cool. But this is pretty nasty. And this came from Zynga. And here we have a few for Yahoo. Dear subscriber, there's no need to trim down your inbox because Yahoo Mail gives you a trillion gigabytes. I'm just kidding, 1,000 gigabytes of storage. But if you want to unsubscribe, then the way they do it is they ask you, are you sure you want to unsubscribe from Daily Yahoo? No cancel is the button. Do you know what no cancel does in this case? It says no, cancel the unsubscribe. And then if you really want to unsubscribe, instead of a button, you've got a link that says, yes, unsubscribe from this newsletter, or yes, unsubscribe from all marketing messages. There is just nobody that is going to take a look at this and get a good sense. So if you have a cognitive impairment, it'll be bad. If you have a motor impairment or a motor and a cognitive impairment, and just think about the intersectionality of adding multiple disabilities, how difficult these kind of patterns are going to be on people. If anybody wants to comment, please go ahead. As I show you the next one, this one is stamps.com. How do I close my stamps.com account? We're sorry that you want to discontinue service. In order to cancel, call us toll free at this number, and only from Friday 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday 6 to 3, Monday through Friday. This is what one of the users was mentioning, how hard it is to unsubscribe to some services. So again, you know, let's say, you know, the reason that I wrote the blog post that turned into Global Accessibility Awareness Day was that my dad had trouble with his vision and he had trouble hearing. So to make a phone call was extremely difficult. And this is the kind of thing that just, it's heartbreaking, because going online should have solved a lot of these problems. If you make things accessible, then you can do your e-commerce online, and by forcing people to really search for where to cancel and then have to call. For my father, this would have been impossible to do independently. He would have needed to have one of us make a phone call in order to cancel the subscription. And this is why this is applicable. Does somebody want to comment? No. Okay. Here we have one where it's, wait, let me see if I have this right. I think this is the Washington Post, and they have a confusing checkbox when you're unsubscribing that makes it unclear whether or not the user is unsubscribing from the service. So you can see here, there's like a bluish tint in the background versus a black tint. So which one is unsubscribe? I think it's really hard to see. And so this is something that I think if you have cognitive issues will be really hard. Probably a screen reader, depending if they labeled it well, it probably would be okay. But it just depends how well this is designed. It might be a really big problem. What time is it? Oh, I have a lot more and we're running out of time. So I'm going to try and skip over some of them and go a little bit faster. Here we have one where there's an unsubscribe link in this mass wall of text. And I'm going to go back and forth a little here so you can kind of see where it is. Toward the bottom, there's this little section that says, if you do not wish to receive further promotional information, use this link, a tiny little link in white that you have to click in order to unsubscribe from the newsletter. It's just despicable. And of course, going to affect people with disabilities more. Here is a fun one where you have a drop down and you have choice between you have a choice between monthly and annual, but there's a drop down box. And if you click on annual, the drop down box goes away completely. And now in order to get it back, there's no real way to do it unless you go back in your browser. So this will certainly affect people with disabilities more that are using AT in order to navigate and be very confusing. This one is like, if everything we've talked about is dark patterns, this one is like a super dark patterns. They try every trick in the book to keep you from unsubscribing. They use manipulinks to offer a discount to stay, and they have a 100 click unsubscribe process for this. And then if you want to leave, they say, I thought we were friends. And this is like super manipulating emotional framing as if you're breaking up with these folks. And if you have depression or you have some kind of cognitive disability, this one is very, very tricky and is certainly targeting people with disabilities more. I think I'm going to skip this one or just go quickly. There's only a back and a cancel button, but there's no way to proceed with unsubscribing. It's completely hidden. Here we have one where it says, please enter a valid phone number without spaces or special characters. But first of all, why do you have to put in your phone number to unsubscribe? This is certainly something where a person with a cognitive issue, oh, sorry, my interface got a little messed up here. Someone with a disability is a lot more likely to not want to maybe share the information and kind of be tricked into sharing the information because of these user interface issues. And now here we have another one where you've got a contrast issue where everything is gray on gray or like light black on gray, and then you have a little unsubscribe button that is in gray. So I've kind of like blown it up so you can see it. And what's really nasty is you know that somebody had to use special CSS in order to add this dark pattern, which makes it really dark. So here for sure, visual impairment. Now here is another one that's just kind of crazy. They disabled the unsubscribe button with code. And the only way for you to unsubscribe is if you are a developer and you know how to code, then you go into this crazy inspect element and then disable the little part that says disabled. It's just crazy. Now we have another one. What's this one? The unsubscribe, wait. This one is a contrast issue. Here it is. I couldn't even find it. If you see create post toward the bottom, it says this email was sent to so-and-so. You can unsubscribe or learn more. Extremely light contrast, extremely hard to see it. Here we have another one from HelloFresh, where if you want to order from them, it's no problem. But if you want to unsubscribe, then you have to talk to them directly, and they don't have a phone number listed over there. So obstruction does impact the people with disabilities more, especially cognitive disabilities, and the user interface is likely to be buggy with screen readers, and it's really bad for people with mobility impairments. Does anybody have an obstruction pattern they want to share that we haven't mentioned? Okay, I'm going to keep going, but feel free to drop a line in the chat if you want to add anything. I'm only halfway done through the slides and I have 10 minutes left. So again, I'm going to try and zoom through these. Here's sneaking pattern. What is this one? This is crazy. This company, do you see the first item is the panel jacket men's, and the second item is a free giant mug for $1. They snuck that into the shopping cart. So you're going around, you're shopping, and then all of a sudden you have an extra item in your cart. So if you have a motor disability or using a screen reader or a cognitive disability, you're much more likely to get affected by this. Here we have another one, Just Fab, where you are signing up. It's here on the bottom. It's hidden in all this fine print on the bottom here. VIP membership. To become a member, simply purchase any item on the site, and now you are enrolled into their membership. There's no way you're going to read that fine print. You know, nobody will. And it would require someone with a screen reader to really listen to all this crazy text. It's just awful. Here we have another one, hotels.com. This hotel was offered, this room was offered for $86.43. But then they did $132 for taxes. So it is 250% of the price, the original price. Just despicable. Here we have a crazy one where you can review the Time Warner Cable's cable service. Would you refer this to a colleague? And they have 1098765432, and then one is ONE. And the reason they did this is if you type 1, they want you to give them a 10 instead of a 1. They want to make it harder for you to give them a 1, probably because a lot of people give them a 1 for their service. I don't know how it is where the listeners are, but in America, cable services are really, really bad. So this is kind of a crazy one. And of course, if you're using AT, you are going to be negatively impacted. Here we have from Quora, you're signing up to Quora, and then you have that little terms of service link, and that comes to here. I mean, there's a massive terms of service, but then there's 47 different email notifications, and you have to dig around in order to find it, and then they subscribe you automatically to all of these. So if there are any Quora subscribers and you're wondering why you get so many emails from them, this is the reason. And again, if you're using assistive technology, this is going to be a nightmare for you. Here we have one where the user registers for an account, and to accept the terms of service, there's a long list of small text, and then there's a teeny tiny little checkbox to opt out of the bank selling your information. And I think it's like, I'm trying to remember, I think it's like 2 pages down, and then here it is, like in red, declaration. At the end of this paragraph, you'll see that there's a little checkbox. Otherwise, they will sell your information. It's just despicable. And he says, true for Quora. Yeah. Okay. Obviously, using AT, this will be really bad. Here we have one where there's a teeny tiny, there's an ad and a teeny tiny little X in order to get out of this. And the color contrast is an issue. So if you have a visual impairment, it will cause you problems. And here, but here we have even one that's even worse from AccuWeather, where they pop one up where the X button is right where the download the app button is. And you can't view the weather until you click on this, and you think you're clicking out of it with the X, but that will actually take you to the app download section. So imagine the impact if you're using assistive technology with this one. Here we have an interesting one from Ryanair. If you are trying to buy a ticket and you do not want insurance, there is a drop-down box under the country of residence list. And if you want to get out of getting insurance, you have to click Don't Insure Me from the country list. That is just complete insanity. And an AT user, what are the chances of really seeing this? When you click the drop-down box, if you are using a screen reader, you have to go through all the countries in order to see it. Here we have another one from Salesforce. This is really great. You have to consent to this privacy statement in order to unsubscribe to the newsletter. But when you are unsubscribing, you are agreeing to the transfer of my personal information to other countries. What kind of privacy statement is that? It's pretty insane, and you'd have to unclick it and save all changes in order to get out of that one. Here's an incredible one for people with cognitive disability. Totally confusing verbiage. The first line says, we do not want you to miss out, but if you would prefer not to hear from us, click here. So the first one, you would have to click on it. The second one, if you would like these sent by email, click here. So you have to unselect it in the second one to not get it. And then the third and fourth one, if you want to not receive them, you have to check them. So it is extremely confusing and all over the place and too many notifications. So if you're using assistive technology or if you have a cognitive impairment, this one is terrible. Here we have, someone mentioned the OS stuff. Windows does something similar that Mac did, where the X button, which normally closes the window and has worked that way for every single upgrade. In this particular case, they really, really, really wanted you to upgrade. So if you click the X button, they would start the update. And here's an example where using assistive technology can be really bad, because what if you had all these custom settings of your OS and now you are forced into an update which causes you to mess up all of your settings that might have taken you a really long time to set up. Imagine using a sip and puff setup. It just destroys your entire work, life, everything, right? So here we again, similar to last time, sneaking patterns impact people with disabilities more. Now we have interface interference, which came up earlier. We're almost out of time, but if you folks want to hang on, I'll just zip through the rest of them. Interface interference is where they kind of change around where things are. So this site uses a fake countdown that loops when it reaches 0 to pressure the user into buying. So this is the Snapchat spectacles. And it says check out in 8:09 for delivery. So that 8:09 is a countdown clock, which is just pressuring you for no reason whatsoever. Super tricky. This one, I think this one was Yahoo, but it might be something else. Try to understand this verbiage. Do not uncheck this box if you wish to be contacted via email. So do not uncheck this box means check this box if you wish to be contacted. It's extremely tricky. I've given this talk many times, and every time I read this, I still wonder which one is which. I believe that you have to uncheck it to not get email updates, but I'm not 100% sure. Cognitive impairment will definitely be affected by this. And here's another example of the emotional manipulation. If you want to leave Facebook, Peter will miss you. Oh, I love Peter. Paul will miss you. Alex will miss you. Beth Ann will miss you. You're breaking up with all of your friends. Why do you want them to hurt you? This is just awful. And if you have a cognitive impairment, it will certainly, or if you have depression, I mean, this is really gonna hurt you. And yeah, it's just like a counter. No matter which selection you pick, they'll give you some kind of counter argument about why you shouldn't leave. You have all these reasons for leaving. It's just so hard for nothing. Now here we have one where you have to click on a shameful option if you do not wish to subscribe. So it says get a free 10-week email series, sign up. It says no thanks, I prefer not making money. So if you have depression, particularly around money, if you're in debt and now you say no thanks, I prefer not making money, aren't you going to be like, really? You want one to the kisser? Very infuriating, and it just adds to people's anxiety. It's terrible. Ina says, reverse psychology for the one of uncheck the box. Yes, exactly. Here we have a Java control panel where they hide the option to suppress sponsor ads. Why do you do this? So you're installing Java and now you're going to see sponsor ads. It's just nasty. What's this one? Here we have one where the green button, and when you see a green somewhere, you want to click on the button, right? So if you click the green button, you're actually going to donate to them. And the white back arrow continues without doing the donation. And it's kind of like, looks like a back button. So again, it's just trying to trick you. Michael says you have to go. Bye, Michael. Glad you were able to join us. Here we have one. This is obviously famous. Does anybody remember when Google first came out? They were laser focused on search, and they would never show you something irrelevant and never do anything wrong, do no evil. Now you have a whole above the fold full of ads, and the ads look exactly like search results. And a lot of people are going to click on the ads thinking that they're actually search results. It works, or they wouldn't use it. And again, if you have cognitive impairment, you're more likely to fall for this. So here we have an unlabeled button in order to unsubscribe. So if you're using a screen reader, what happens if you have an unlabeled button? It's going to be pretty tricky, right? So this certainly affects screen reader users much more. Here we have another example where you have a sad phone and they're trying to evoke empathy. Can you imagine how sad this phone is going to be if you leave? This is an emotional appeal that affects people with cognitive disabilities. Here we have like a really classic case of interface interference where Twitter created a new user called Explore, and they want you to click on it. So typically people click on the notifications because they want to see who's like them. So they move the notifications over in order to trick you to click on Explore. I think if you're using AT, that will make it a little more difficult. Here we have one where they have confusing options for what you want to do. OK proceeds to cancel the order, and cancel returns to the order. Cognitive. All right, what's this one?
I didn't understand it myself, I must say. Sometimes
this one?
Yeah. Sometimes the words are so tricky that you need to read the message a few times. It's like reading bills and regulations. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done this talk several times, and I still don't know which one is which after reading them over and over again. So you're 100% right. Now, this is another one where they have tricky selection buttons. The first set of buttons you have to you click if you don't want the information. The second set of buttons if you do want to receive the information, and you can easily be tricked into signing up for something you don't want. And this one is Royal Mail. Here, what's this one? Oh, this one is tricky. They have, usually if you want to consent, there should be a button clearly telling you. But here they have, I have read and understand the terms and conditions, and underneath there, they have a more info link with like kind of a down arrow. You have to click on that in order to see that you have to unselect something in order to opt out of sharing information and coming in and signing up for spam, which is why so many times you're on a newsletter and you didn't even know that that you accepted the terms to get on it. It's pretty crazy. Here we have one where there are check boxes that appear as radio buttons because they don't want you to click don't post, don't telephone, don't email, don't text. Every one of those is a checkbox, but by making it a radio button, you're more likely to select only one of them. Depending how they implemented it, if you use a screen reader, this again is one of those rare times where you might be better off. But if you've got a motor impairment or cognitive, this is certainly a bad one. And here we have really somebody that was ahead of the game when it came to dark patterns. This is actually from the voting ballot of April 10, 1938. And the text reads, do you agree with the reunification of Austria with the German Reich that was enacted on 13 March 1938? And do you vote for the party of our leader Adolf Hitler? And there's a large circle that's labeled yes, and the small circle labeled no. And clearly the size discrepancy is notable enough as a dark pattern, but the joining of two separate questions into one answer is absolutely a dark pattern. So this most certainly will impact people with disabilities more. And we've got one more section, which is forced action. I thought that was the last one, but there's actually one more, forced action. Users are required to subscribe to the newsletter in order to create an account. Isn't that crazy? And then we've got this one here. This is one which is kind of tricky the way it moves around. This can create people that create seizures in people that have vestibular disorders. And it's an ad that looks like a game. And it uses Flash to make it interactive. When the user moves the cursor around the ad, the target moves with it. And then when you try and stomp the spider, you wound up actually getting taken to the advertiser's site. So that's just another tricky way. And now we have from LinkedIn, I don't know if anybody else fell for this, maybe I'm just the stupid one that fell for it, but you put in your email and then it says they'll import your address book, but they're also going to send an email saying that you invited all of your friends in your address book, including all your ex-girlfriends, which unfortunately has happened to me more than once on these type of dark patterns, where they get an invite to join you on LinkedIn, and maybe your enemies too, really kind of nasty. What's this one? We have a game that, oh, this one gives players levels that are impossible to complete in order to get them to buy power-ups or purchase extra lives. And if the user does not purchase anything from the game, they slowly increase the difficulty in order to retain playability. So you think you have a free game, but they just make it harder and harder to use, which is something that I've recently encountered. Obviously, if you have a motor impairment, it's going to really suck. And if you have a cognitive impairment as well. Oh man, this is a new one I had to add. Sony issued a patent that you need to stand up and say the brand name in order to stop a commercial. So you'll maybe get up and say McDonald's. Since we're toward the end, I'm going to try and offer you again to comment in the chat what you think of this particular one and how it will affect people with disabilities. I think it's kind of obvious, but like if you can't stand up and they make you stand up to say something, isn't that pretty nasty? Yeah, I think this is the last one. So anybody have any others that you would like to add? Now that we've gone through the whole presentation, if you want to speak up and share on video, I'll give you a moment. All right,
hey, Joe, Jeremy said here, and I just kind of wanted to comment. I could be wrong here, but it feels like a lot of the culprits for the dark patterns seem to be originating from marketing departments. You know, web developers typically get the get blamed for that, but I think in those situations, a lot of these situations, it's like they're more of the messenger rather than the one who's creating the message here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's 100% marketing or people that want to make more money sometimes will come from the top. And I've always thought that one good way to kind of battle this is if we kind of band together UX, UX, design, developers, everybody, project managers, everybody involved in creating digital products. If we created an association and then we got a lawyer to come out and say as part of the employment contract that we will not force the person who signs this contract to implement a dark pattern, and perhaps provide a third party that will be a bit of an arbitrator arbitrator that says, oh, well, let's look at what I'm being asked to build. Is this a dark pattern or not? Because what happens particularly in Silicon Valley, at least before COVID, or any location which funds technology, they have to fight in order to find tech people to build their products. And if you put into the employment agreement this aspect, then everybody's going to call out a dark pattern. And then at the end of the day, maybe it'll be hard for a Facebook or a Google to actually add this to their employment agreements, but maybe a LinkedIn can do it, which will result in them doing less dark patterns. And now if you're sitting there and you're saying, well, should I join LinkedIn or Google or Facebook? You might pick LinkedIn. And I'm just using those as examples, but it could be any of the companies or Apple. I think this will really push the companies to start to create solutions without dark patterns and empower us, because without us, they can't build anything. So this is one of the few solutions I've actually thought of. I'm gonna read a couple more comments here as I wrap up. We need more of these talks. I have students telling me how much interested they are to learn more. Happy to talk about this, and happy for you folks to carry it on as well. And please do share this idea of creating an association, because I think that can be successful. And then Maria says, check out Tristan Harris's organization. He's a former design ethicist at Google who is now advocating against dark patterns. Yes, I've looked at Tristan Harris quite a bit. I also do an ethics talk that I sometimes wrap in together with this dark patterns talk, and he is actually excellent. He created a slide deck on Google which went viral internally, and they thought it would change Google's behavior, but in the end it didn't, and he left the company, and he does wonderful work. And then Maha is asking if we can share the slides. Yeah, I can send them to you, Jeremy, if you like, and be happy to share it out. I do have one more slide. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say before you are finished that it was very important talk, and it is very important that you did this talk, and I hope that there will be more like this, because it is very important.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've given this talk a fair bit. I saw somebody else started talking about dark patterns relating to people with disabilities as well. And then someone is, oh wait, there's a couple of comments here. It seems there's a competition on the best way to avoid your users from unsubscribing. Yes. Many times I receive newsletters by book authors I have read, and in order to unsubscribe, you need to view the content in the browser, navigate to the browser, search for the unsubscribe button, which may use a non-descriptive text. Yes, absolutely. Maha asked if I have similar upcoming events that we can attend. I do regular webinars. If you go to diamond.la, you will see them. I have a little bit of a busy time coming up, but tomorrow I'm emceeing an event. We're kicking off the AIR Internet Rally, which is a nobility.org activity. It's my first time participating, but I'm the chair. So if you can join that, please do. And Jeremy, can we help maybe with sharing that link when I send you the slides?
Yes, absolutely. I'll coordinate with Maha and Farah on that.
Awesome. All right, let me just read the last slide, and then we'll wrap it up. So there are legal implications to these dark patterns. It started to get some governments to pay attention. So there's something called the Equal Access Act, which I believe is in the UK. And because dark patterns target people with disabilities, it challenges the right to equal access. And and that opens up the possibility of a lawsuit. But another interesting aspect is that it also ruins the goodwill of organizations that went through tremendous efforts to be accessible. You'll go to a site that talks over and over about their accessibility, and then you see a dark pattern that whoever did it didn't even test it. Obviously, you're doing a dark pattern. Are you going to test it with assistive technology with people with disabilities? They barely test their core activities that way, let alone their dark patterns. So this opens up the Americans with Disabilities Act violations, which relates to America, but since this is an international audience, there are probably local laws that are affected, hopefully. If not, then lobby your government in order to get these laws passed. So thank you very much. My Twitter is @JoeDevon. My email is joe@diamond.la, and Jeremy will share more information. Feel free to shoot me a note on LinkedIn, but do say that it came from the from this talk, because I get way more invites than I have time to answer, but I'll be happy to connect with you offline. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeremy, Farah, Maha, and whoever else I might have forgotten to thank. And I will see you all online soon.
I just would like to say a couple of things before we leave this very, very nice session. Joe, thank you so much for doing this. I know it's very early at your end, so you really enriched our knowledge, and we are looking forward to learn more. I want to thank very, very much Jeremy as well for supporting us in this session and for offering us the Zoom and the captions. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And Farah, thank you so much for being the secret soldier behind all this and for helping us. And I also want to say two things. Many of the attendees are interested in what you said about advocating to have an entity that would foster or spread awareness about these dark patterns. And the second thing is that this session, it was supposed to be live on Facebook, and we faced a technical problem, so we will be posting the recording for the rest to be able to see it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day and good evening.